Welcome to the Beware the Moon podcast. My name is Hannah, and today we're going to be talking about 2022's Speak No Evil, which is very different from 2024's Speak No Evil. Speak No Evil's original movie is actually foreign. I want to say it's a Dutch film because all the actors' names appear to be Dutch, and certainly they do speak Dutch in the movie, but I don't know if you would consider it a Dutch movie if the production company is, in a certain area, or if it's the director or the actors. I don't know. Anyway, it's a foreign movie. Luckily, they have lots of subtitles, and honestly, a lot of it is in English, so don't let that be a turnoff for you. This movie is actually really good. It's a very specific type of horror. This movie kind of feels like being invited to your friend's house, but their parent explodes on them like an hour in, and they get grounded, but like they're not taking you home or calling your parents, so you're just like sitting on the couch chilling. This is kind of like the first group project you had in 7th grade and nobody wants to take charge, like showing up to a birthday party as a kid but then realizing you weren't invited, and they're very open about it, like your mom inviting all the awkward, weird, scary relatives to Thanksgiving and then leaves you to host them all. That's what this movie feels like. So if you're a social anxiety person, this one, you might want to skip it. It is very emotionally painful. A lot of it is like, oh no, stop. Just like social graces is kind of like the theme, I would say, of this movie. And essentially it's saying like, fuck social graces. If something is wrong, GTFO, like don't wait around, which I approve of. It's got a very good point, and I like that. I would say trigger warnings would be child abuse for sure, and then we have like full nudity going on, like male and female, gender equality and all that. But this movie is really good. If you like, I was worried it was going to be something like torture porn-esque for some reason. I don't know why I thought that, but that's really not the case unless you consider like social snafus and like, I don't know, like unless you consider that torture, which to an extent it definitely is. There's a lot of that in this movie. That's kind of, like I said, the theme of this movie. So if you're like socially awkward situations, having to stand up for yourself, having to tell people, this movie is very like non-confrontational until it becomes confrontational. And so if you're a non-confrontational person, this movie is gonna hurt you. Because that's kind of, like I said, that's kind of the theme is, confronting weird social graces. So, but it is a really great movie. They do everything really well in this movie. There's a lot of fun shots. I really like the ominous music that plays. I really, really love the acting. Particularly the guy who plays Patrick. His name is Fedha van Hout. And I totally butchered that name, I'm 100% sure. But he is incredible as Patrick. Like, he's very like, oh man, he's just so, it's so good. He's so charismatic and charming, but then at the same time he's terrifying, and also he's a dick. And he like it's really like a balance between those two, and it would be a hard balance to find, but he does it perfectly, and so does Karina, who plays Karen. Karina Smulders, she does an amazing job as well. And I really think, to be honest, this movie kind of hinges on performance. And a lot of what people say is what they say, but then I always say half of what you say is what you say, the other half is how you say it. And that's very true. People read into body language. People read into tone. So they use that to their great advantage in this movie. And the actors who are, I guess you would say, the protagonists, they antagonists. They actually are incredible in their roles. It's just really good. It's just a really good movie. If you're not sure, like, I would say don't spoil this movie for yourself. Like, obviously, there's something sinister going on, but don't spoil it for yourself. If you're afraid of torture porn, this is not that. If you're afraid of, like I said, just, like, long, drawn-out scenes of people being weird socially, like, then maybe this is also not for you. But if you're specifically worried about, like, they're pulling out eyeballs and stuff like that, that's not this movie. This movie is not. There is a tongue-cutting scene, but it doesn't get more graphic than that. So I would say definitely watch it. It's really, really good. I've been putting it off because I wasn't sure if I could handle it, because I thought there was going to be more torture porn, like I said, but no. Anyway, that's the non-spoiler review. Here's the spoiler review, because this movie is so fucking good. So, they're driving, we open and it's like a night drive, and they're going down a dirt road and everything is squeaky, and it seems nefarious because of all the ominous music and, like, the dirt road and the night driving, but it's just normal night travel. I wrote, why have I been tricked like this? I didn't do anything to you, movie. So I was expecting something different, but no. And then the ominous music continues, and we get this beautiful scenery and a pool. And we find out later that they're in Italy on vacation. It doesn't really spell that out word for word at the moment. But, you know, we see that they're at the pool. The family is a trio. So the mom, the dad, and the daughter in this case. A guy walks over and asks, is this chair free? And I wrote, it's not. This isn't even America. Ha! Got him. So, anyway, he's like, yeah, no, like, it is free. So, he uses the chair. Everything's normal. Everybody's having a good time. It's very bright, very happy. I mean, everyone's on vacation. And this place is like, it's not like a hotel or anything. It's like this big house in the middle of, like, nowhere in Italy, it seems like. But also nearby a city. So, like, I don't know if this is a timeshare and they just do things differently over in Italy with their timeshares or what. But they have, like, a really close dinner, basically, and they have to leave Agnes, their daughter, with a babysitter. And there's this miscommunication about apple juice. Like, she's like, no apple juice before bed. It's too much sugar. And the sitter's like, apple juice before bed. And they're like, no apple juice before bed. And she's like, yes, no apple juice. Or she's like, no apple juice. But she's, like, nodding, and you're just like, is she receiving the message? You're just not really sure. And it's kind of like, it already kind of sets up who this couple is. So it's just a good little piece at the very beginning, a little bit of taste of what's to come. So they're at the grown-ups only dinner, and the chair guy from earlier stands up. He gives a very friendly speech. He talks about that banging last night was me. I apologize, you know, I lost my way or whatever. And then, you know, he just wishes everybody a good time, and he seems really friendly and, like, cool and stuff, and, like I said, very charismatic. But later on, I wondered what that really was, because I seriously doubt this guy is going around banging on doors and stuff. So I don't think it's him, and you can just kind of, like, put that in your mind for later, because I think it's Abel, the son. So then everybody is, like, grooving. They're so excited. He toasts to everyone. Then there's, like, this group of music people. I want to say it's choir people, but I don't know if it is. This is, like, I guess a cultural thing, maybe, where I was not part of, like, singing in choir and music culture, so I don't really know what they would be considered. But it's this group of people, and they're singing very, like, operatic type music. Like, a lot of it leans on the vocals. And so our dad of the original trio, Bjorn, that's his name, Bjorn just looks devastated during the singing. And I wrote, oh, he is. Oh, he's crying. Oh. And so chair guy looks back at him and raises his glass a little bit, and then Bjorn raises it back, and they both take a sip. And so later on, I wrote, chair guy pulls a Michael Myers. He's like, Bjorn is looking outside and he sees the chair guy, and then he looks away and looks back and he's gone, and like, classic Michael Myers. Obviously, you're like, this isn't vibing. This is not a good vibe. Which, of course, this is a horror movie. In real life, would this be all that? I don't know. I don't know if it would be all that intimidating or like red flaggery, I guess. I mean, Patrick, the guy who's pulling the Michael Myers, he's the chair guy, we come to find out. He definitely is pulling all kinds of red flags. Someone told him this is capture the flag, so he's got literally all of the red flags. All of them. But I don't think this is actually one of them. Just because, you know, this is a horror movie, so, like, it's a little bit different. Anyway, so, so they go, the family, which is Bjorn, Agnes, and Louisa, they go into the city, and they're walking around, and it's, like, all these really cool shots of, like, streets in Italy, and so it's like a lot of cobblestone and stone and like tightly knit streets, and they're just walking through this beautiful scenery, and the dad is looking for his daughter's bunny because she lost it. So he eventually finds it and then brings it back, and now we get to see this is where we meet the other family. So chair guy is Patrick. He's got a wife, Karen, or Karine? I don't know how you would say it. And then his son, Abel. And I've been saying that word, Abel, for like 2 decades now. And I've never once said it that way. And the moment Patrick said it that way, I was like, damn, he's fucking right. The more you know, people, the more you know. Cultural learning, very, very important. Anyway, so, Patrick throws some respect at Bjorn for going and finding the rabbit. He calls it, like, heroic. And Bjorn's like, haha, okay. And he's like, no, man, really. Like, that's good for you. Like, mad respect, basically. And so, obviously, Bjorn is like, he feels a little bit, you know, puffed up and like, oh, okay. And that's what Patrick does, like, this whole time, is Patrick is boosting Bjorn's ego. So, Bjorn loves Patrick, and like he can ignore all the weird stuff because Patrick is feeding his ego, which like we see is very much devastated by just like their lifestyle. And then also when you're non-confrontational, that also just, I mean, like it's so crazy because it's an insecurity to be non-confrontational, because that means you're afraid of confronting someone else, you're afraid of drawing boundaries and, you know, setting lines and, you know, saying this is a line, don't cross it, you know. And the reason you're not saying that is because you're afraid of the other person's response. And so that in and of itself is an insecurity, but then you're even more insecure when people start crossing those imaginary boundaries that you haven't told them about because you're too insecure to tell them about them. So then it gets even worse. So like it's just this vicious cycle. And basically what I'm trying to say, people, is that your life will get so much better when you start confronting people, and you don't have to be aggressive about it, but just like put your boundaries out there and enforce them. You're gonna live a much better life. And this movie is like an extreme illustration of that. Anyway, so they get along so well at dinner. Like they're really kicking it. Like the 3 of them and the 3 of them, like all 6 of them really grooving. Abel is not saying much, and we find out later, his dad says, you know, it's a condition he was born with. He was born without a tongue, so he can't really speak. It's a little bit difficult if you don't have a tongue. But during this dinner, Patrick's like, oh, you should come visit us in the countryside in Holland. And, like, clearly Bjorn really wants to get out of the city life. And then, like, we see back home, like, he's just really, like, this city life is just crushing his soul, I guess. And so, like, that's clearly something he wants. And they're like, yeah, okay, you know, passing, like, this is someone just being polite is essentially how they see it. And I think that's so funny. And yep, a lot of times that's what it is. So anyway, Bjorn is reading his daughter something fucking weird. I was like, what the fuck is he reading his daughter? I don't know what it is. Something about dead rabbits. Maybe he's reading Watership Down. I have no idea. They get a postcard from Patrick and Karen and Abel, and they invite Bjorn, Agnes, and Louisa to their home in the countryside. So they're kind of having like a dinner with their city friends, and they're bored of the city life and their city friends. And their friends say, oh, like, at first Louisa's like, we have been doing too much flying, we're not gonna fly. So that means automatically visiting them is a no. And the friends are like, oh, well, you can drive down there. It's only like 8 hours. And they're like, it's nice to have friends abroad. Nobody, that isn't abroad. 8 hours? You can drive for 8 hours in Florida and still be in fucking Florida. This is why Europeans are like, Americans are so untraveled and they're so uncultured. Sorry that if I trip, I don't accidentally end up in France or some shit, okay? Like, our country is huge. If you've been to multiple states, that's like we can fit like 3 different European countries into one single state. You could probably fit like 4 or 5 into Texas. So don't even go there with me. Anyway, rant aside, Bjorn says that it'd probably be rude to decline, you know? So, and it's so funny because his city friend's like, yeah, what's the worst that could happen? Oh, buddy. So then we get to the Holland countryside. Woo, so fun. And already things are getting fucking weird. Like the second they step in the door, like, Karen is like, oh, you can keep your coat on or take it off. But then she's like, give me your coat. And it's like very much a demand. And you're like, what? And I'm like, I'm already leaving. Like, sorry, I didn't even want to show up. I'm gone. You're gonna be weird like that to me. And then my notes just say, Agnes bed, I'm fucking ended. Because it's literally just like this tiny ass cushion on the floor in Abel's room. And she's like, this is Agnes's bed. You know, Abel was really excited to make it up for her, blah, blah, blah. And it, like, literally, it's like a couch cushion on the floor. And they're like, oh. And, like, Louisa whispers to Agnes, we'll figure it out. And, like, Agnes has trouble sleeping on her own anyway. So, like, it's kind of a moot point to have that little cushion, but also it's just so fucking funny that that's what they're offering her. Anyway, they brought a gift for their hosts, and it's a coffee cup with the Little Mermaid on it. And Patrick's like, oh, I heard she's kind of disappointing in real life. And they were like, no, it's good. Like, you know, our country, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's good, actually, you know? And you're like, oh, that's weird. It's already very weird. So Patrick cuts boar and insists Louisa eat the first bite, even though he knows she's a vegetarian. Like, they had a very, like, clear-cut discussion about it when they were in Italy, and he was like, oh, that's so good for the environment, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, yeah, that's why I do it, yada, yada. And now here he is like, here, eat this pork, basically. And, yep, that's not great. So already we're seeing, enforce your boundaries, people. Just fucking enforce your boundaries. Set them up, let people know where they are, and then stand right by them. And you're not gonna end up in this weird situation. Anyway, Bjorn is on trash duty, which I think is fucking hilarious. Like, who is like, oh, you're a guest? Here, why don't you take out the trash for us? Maybe Alfred, I don't really know. Abel sneaks up on him, and God, does this kid look horrified. He looks around, and then he opens his mouth to show Bjorn that his tongue is missing. And as he does, Patrick bangs on the window of the house and calls for Abel to come inside. And you're like, oh, that's, And then that night, like, while the adults are talking, you can hear Abel moaning in the background, and it sounds, oh, it's awful. And they're like, oh, no, it's just part of his disease. And they're like, is he, like, in pain? And they're like, oh, no, he just, you know, it's just rough for him because he feels like, you know, he can't communicate well with other people. And Louise is like, oh, I can understand him just fine. And they're kind of like it's so funny because Patrick and Karen are like, ha, okay, kind of like an attitude. And you're like, oh, wow. They're like low-key calling her bullshit. Anyway, so Agnes that night is like, can't sleep, so she goes to sleep with Mom and Dad, and she's like, can we leave the light on, Dad? And Dad's like, no, you're sleeping with Mom and Dad, nothing's gonna happen to you, we need to turn the light off because it's time for sleep. And that's kind of like a through line with them and Agnes is like, constantly, like, a little fearful, and I think that's what the bunny is about. The bunny's name is Ninus, I think. But, she has, like, a stuffed bunny that she carries around everywhere, and it's, like, a security thing for her, and then her mom and her dad are the other pieces of that, which is very typical of kids. I mean, who are you going to feel most secure with? You know, your parents. So they promise her consistently, you know, mom and dad are here, nothing's going to happen to you. Anyway, the next day, they're all walking through this field, and, like, it really does look beautiful. Despite it being, like, it's kind of, like, wintry there, but it's not snowing. We get these wide, ominous shots and, like, this ominous music, and I just think it's so funny because, like, they're, like, hiking in this field, and they look like they're having a good time, and they're, like, laughing and stuff, and it's like, brrr, and you're just like, oh, okay, maybe we're not having a good time? I don't really know. But they stop at this, like, it's like those typical Dutch-looking windmills. They stop at that, and there's, like, a little playground in front of it, and we have this issue on the slide where Agnes wants to slide down, but Abel won't move from the bottom of the slide. And so she tells her mom about it, and Louisa asks Abel, you know, can you move? You know, she really wants to try the slide, and he just stares at her, doesn't try and communicate, nothing. And so she goes over and talks to Karen and Patrick storms over there and, like, scruffs him and, like, is rough with him and talking to him in their language, and then he forces Abel to apologize. And they're like, oh, no, he doesn't need to apologize. It's really okay. And he's like, no, Abel wants to apologize. And so he kind of, like, musters out what he can of sorry, which is not much because obviously no tongue makes talking a lot more difficult. So then when they get back to the house, Louisa kind of pulls Bjorn aside and she tells him she doesn't like being here. And he's like, why? And she's like, they're not pleasant to be around. And I also think that's an interesting line because part of it is, yeah, they're fucking weirdos. And then the other part is like, I don't know, it's just this weird societal standard that everybody kind of sets up where it's like you have to be pleasant to be around all the time for people to like you and want to be around you, and that's true. And especially when you're just starting off being friends with someone, you don't want to see all the dirt and all the skeletons in their closet. Like, you don't want that. And that's kind of like they're leaking a lot of that kind of vibe out where they're like, here's our family issues, we're airing that for you in front of you. And I will tell you, it is not pleasant. I've known people like that, I've been in situations like that, and I'm like, I don't care about your personal family dramas. I don't want to be part of it. I'm not part of this family. This is not my beautiful house. This is not my beautiful wife. I don't need to be here right now while you guys are dealing with this. And yeah, it's just like a really interesting, this movie has so many like subtle, like, it touches on so many subtle societal cues that we've just kind of accumulated over the years, and like just doing what it does, like, story-wise, is like, you do feel uncomfortable, you feel for them, you really want them to get out of this situation because you're like, I'm uncomfortable and I'm not even in it, I'm just watching it play out in like a false scenario. But like, it's also like, there are people like this. It's so fucking crazy to think, like, and not like, I mean, like, this awkward, like, just unpleasantness. It's crazy that there are people who will do that in front of, like, people. There are people who will do that in front of others. Like, I was kind of raised, like, you know, if my parents had a problem with me, they would take me aside and they would talk to me, or maybe they would take me to the bathroom and I would get a spanking or whatever. Usually they would just take me aside and talk to me. Even, you know, I had PTSD from very young age, and so I would have anxiety attacks and meltdowns, essentially, and my mom would pull me aside, and she would calm me down, tell me to breathe, and she's like, I understand why you act like this, and I'm so sorry you've been through what you've been through, but nobody else is gonna understand this. Like, you have to get it together. And she's right. Like, if you see some kid just breaking down in the grocery store because they saw a picture of an emu, like, you'd be like, what the fuck? Like, you would just be, like, freaked out. And a lot of people these days will essentially call defects on you. Like, they're like, that kid's being abused somehow. And, like, yes, I was being abused, but not by my parents. And my parents stopped it. And it's just, it's just, like, this weird, like, there are certain things you can and can't do in society. And so you're supposed to teach your kids that. And then you as the adult is supposed to follow that and kind of model that. And Patrick and Karen obviously are not that. And then Bjorn and Louisa are trying to be that. And it's so, like, it's just such a, it's, like, just so extremely opposite. Anyway, after she says they're not pleasant to be around, Karen invites them. She's like, oh, we should do, there's a restaurant in town. It's really good. We don't want you guys to miss that opportunity, blah, blah, blah. So she invites them to dinner that night. And fucking Bjorn's like, oh, they're unpleasantly inviting us to dinner, And I just wrote, stop. Because he says, I'm sure you'll survive. And I'm like, oh my gosh, shut the fuck up. I cannot believe you just mocked your own wife. That's fucked. Like, maybe you don't agree with her, but you don't fucking mock her. What are you, a child? Like, I could never, I don't understand. Why would you mock your spouse who's clearly feeling very uncomfortable? If that were my husband, he would get a swift kick to the family jewels, you know what I'm saying? But again, that's because I'm a big fan of setting boundaries and enforcing them. I have no problem doing that. I think it's really fun to enforce boundaries, honestly. But again, it's just kind of showing that Bjorn and Louisa are not the kind of people who set boundaries or enforce them. So as they're, like, getting ready to leave that night and Louisa's talking to Agnes, someone shows up at the door and she's like, Louisa's kind of like, what the heck? And this adult man walks in and him and Karen start talking and she's like, Louisa's like, who the fuck is this? And Karen's like, oh, the children aren't coming. And she's just like, what? And this is a big, I would be drawing the line so hard. This would be full stop for me, man. Like, I don't care if you're male or female. I'm not leaving my child with a stranger at a stranger's house. What? That does not compute, my friend. And Louisa, you could tell that she's, like, not comfortable with it. But, and neither is Bjorn. Like, Bjorn is also, like, he's really hesitant. But then Patrick's like, oh, come on, guys, let's go. And he ushers them out of the house, and he's, like, honking the horn. And so they're like, okay. So they get in the car. And in the car, we get even more awkwardness. Where the couple up front, which is Patrick and Karen, are speaking their own language and not talking at all to their guests. Which is just fucking weird. Like, my Nana was really big on hosting. So, like, as a host, you're supposed to, like, make sure they're comfortable, make sure they have what they want. You're going to converse with them. Like, everything is about them while they're here, essentially. It's whatever they want. If they want an electric boogaloo, you go to the electric boogaloo. If they want to, skin deer while they're there, you find them a deer. Like, that's just the shit you kind of do when you're the host. If they want to play poker, you go buy poker chips. You just do those things. And Patrick and Karen are, like, so opposite of that. It's so painful. And I've had friends who speak different languages than me. I get it. You want to speak your native tongue. That's fine. I'm cool with that. Like, one time I was stuck between two friends of mine who speak French. And I just was politely, like, looking at one and then at the other as they were talking. And, like, I was literally sitting in between them. And they're talking across me in French. And I don't speak any French. I can say fucking French, and that's about it. And I'm just looking back and forth and back and forth. And the one goes, do you understand what we're saying? And I was like, no, not even a little bit. And they were just like, what? Like, that kind of confused them, but I was like, no, where I'm from, it's, like, impolite to not look at whoever is speaking. So, if you're gonna not include me, I will include myself, motherfuckers. And they just, like, they were cool with it. They thought it was funny, but like, and that's kind of like it, I don't mind not being included, but also like I'm not gonna like, I don't know, sit there awkwardly. I just think that's weird. And that's kind of like, there's no way for Bjorn and Louisa to do that. And it's very painful. It's so painful. And they're like, oh, are we almost to the restaurant? And they're like, oh yeah. And that's the other thing is like, there's so much of that in this movie where they're like, oh, are we almost to, and they're just like, yeah. They don't like tell you how long. No one knows where we're going except Patrick and Karen. And so you're just like, huh, okay. So they get to the restaurant, and it's so funny because later on Louisa refers to it as a roadhouse. And yeah, that's basically what it is. This is like a little hole in the wall, which, not to knock holes in the wall, like there are a few places that I absolutely love that are like holes in the wall. There's a place in my hometown called Night Owl that I absolutely adored. Literally they had fried cookie dough balls and they would put powdered sugar on them. Literally would gain 3 pounds every time I ate them, which I would then burn off because I was running 5 miles every night at that point, so it didn't matter. But that place was a hole in the wall, and I stood by that place. I was like, this place fucking rocks. And sometimes they do. Sometimes that, the best places are hole in the wall. There's a hole in the wall Italian place that used to be really good in the town I live in now. Unfortunately, it shut down after COVID, but it was really good. It was really good. But this place doesn't have restaurant vibes. So, like, the place we used to go to in town that had really good Italian food was set up like an Italian place. Like, it had a Tuscany feel. So, like, they were, from the outside, you're like, this is just a weird storefront. But then you go in and you're like, okay, it's actually like a nice restaurant on the inside. This is not that. This definitely looks like a roadhouse on the inside. So then my next note is everything is Stampot. You're also now Stampot. Because they're looking at the menu and he's like, what is this? And he's like, oh, that's Stampot. And he's like, what about this? And he's like, that's also basically Stampot. And I was like... And literally Louisa goes, is everything Stampot? And he's like, yeah, just let me take care of you. And I was like, okay, that's weird. Also, like, it's like one of the few things in this movie that I found really fucking funny. And then Louisa tells Patrick, as she's handing the menu to the waiter, you do know I'm vegetarian, right? Like, you remember that. And he's like, oh yeah, good for the environment. And then he's like, but you eat fish. And she's like, yeah. And he's like, well, first of all, that makes you pescatarian, not a vegetarian. And then he's basically like, how is eating fish better for the environment than, like, not eating meat? Because we treat our oceans like shit, basically. And you're like, I don't want to have this conversation. Please? Louisa obviously feels the same. So then we cut to, like, Patrick and Karen. Patrick wants to dance and pulls his wife into a dance, and so they leave the other couple alone for an uncomfortably long time. And so Bjorn eventually is like, okay, Louisa, you want to dance? So they go to dance, and it gets weird because, like, Patrick and Karen are, like, going for it. Like, they're, like, grinding and they're, like, making out, and Bjorn and Louise are way more rigid, of course. But then, like, once the other couple starts, like, making out and groping, though, they're kind of like, all right, that has killed our buzz. So then it cuts to, like, they're trying to pay, and Patrick, he's like, whoa, someone had a good time tonight. And it's like, it was fucking you, Patrick. You had the good time tonight. Nobody else was having a good time but you, Patrick. And so Bjorn's like, oh, do you want us to help? And he's like, nah. And then he's like, they're just standing there, and he's like, so we're paying for the meal then? And he's like, oh, thank you, dude. And I was like, oh my god. Just, like, the shamelessness. I was like, wow, that's so fucking weird. Again, that's, like, not what you do when you're the host. My Nana would be fucking rolling over in her grave, man. If I ever pulled anything like that on anyone I had invited over, my Nana would fucking haunt me that very night, and I would never hear the end of it. She would just haunt me forever. Actually, probably. I'd never sleep again. So on the ride home, Patrick turns up the music, and Louisa tells Bjorn, like, can we turn the music down? And so Bjorn asks on her behalf, which this is another problem that I want to point out, because Louisa is the one who wants the confrontation. Like, she wants things to be done her way, but she's not willing to confront other people herself. She always defaults to Bjorn to do it. And Bjorn is also non-confrontational. So the confrontation is very weak. And it's not strong. Like, it's very easy to ignore. And so, like, sure, it's an issue that Bjorn can't confront someone with more confidence, but Louisa doesn't really confront them at all. And so that's the other issue, is you're supposed to enforce your own boundaries. You don't expect other people to do it for you. That is a really big issue. Like, even if you're married, even if you have an assistant, like, you're still the one who has to enforce your boundaries. Anyway, so Bjorn asks on her behalf, and Patrick, he just goes, "Oh, I love this song," and turns it up more. And so Louisa just yells, "Turn down the fucking music." So Patrick turns it off, and then Karen apologizes, "Oh, he's just really drunk, blah, blah, blah." And then he turns it back up, and he starts, like, mocking Louise. And there's lots of swerving, like, holy tits, like, and it's very intentional, I think, because, like, he's fucking with them, but also, like, I mean, he is drunk, don't get me wrong, but also, like, he's intentionally swerving to make it even scarier, and they're just in the back, like, grabbing the oh shit bar, like, oh shit, man, because, yeah, this drunk guy's gonna wrap us around a tree any second. So, as soon as they get back, Louisa and Bjorn rush to Abel's room, and they see that Agnes is asleep. Which is kind of a miraculous thing, and she's alive, she's fine. And so they're like, oh, they take a breath of relief, and then Louisa's like, I want a shower. So she's in the shower, and you hear the bathroom door open, and as soon as the bathroom door opened, I just wrote, "Fuck me sideways." That is so uncomfortable. That's very uncomfy, because it's not her husband in there, and with the boot steps, you can tell it's a man. And so you can hear he starts brushing his teeth, and you hear his boots walk closer to the shower, and then they, like, go away, and then he, like, puts up his brush and everything. And this is, like, not even, like, a full cover shower door. Like, it's one of those foggy glass ones, so it's not like a curtain or anything like that, so she can see his outline and everything. He can see her outline, and the way he stands, like, he comes closer and it blocks the light in the shower, so you're like, oh my god. Like, that's just, oh no, that's very rapey vibes, but also please stop. So then when he leaves, she gets the fuck out of there. Like, she just puts a towel on and runs for it. And then she gets back to the room, and she doesn't tell Bjorn what happened, which is insane to me. Like, I don't understand how you're still here. If I were in the bathroom and a married man walked in on me and just started, brushing his teeth, and then got really close to the shower so he could take a peek at my outline, and then walked out of there, I'd be like, we're getting the fuck out of here. Also, I would have said something to him the second he walked in. I'd have been like, oh, someone's in here. And I don't know what I would have done, like, after, if he just stayed in there, but probably wouldn't have been nice. I'd be like, get the fuck out at that point. But again, non-confrontational. That's the people Patrick and Karen are looking for, those non-confrontational-y people. Anyway, like I said, she doesn't say anything to Bjorn, which I'd be like, we're getting the fuck out. But also, why would you not tell him that the host, your buddy, that you think is so cool, just walked in on me in the shower? And, yeah, that's fucking weird. Like, what? Why don't you tell him that? That's your husband. But anyway, instead they decide to get it on, and that's weird. And, like, you kind of get the sense that they haven't been able to have sex for a while, because Agnes is constantly in their bed. And, like, as they're doing it, they hear Agnes calling for them, but they fucking ignore her. Which, I mean, as a parent, you've got to put your foot down at some point. Like, listen, you gotta do what you gotta do. I understand you don't want your kid to be scared. That's really sweet. And I understand you don't want them to be uncomfortable. That's also really sweet. But, like, and in this environment, okay, maybe let them sleep in your room. But in a different environment, like at your home, maybe be like, no, you're sleeping in your room. I mean, my parents did that with us because it's very important for the marriage to stay good. And it's like, it's so crazy because I'm like, your kids are important, but if you guys, the foundation of the family, aren't good, then the kids aren't going to have it good. That's just kind of the way that goes. Anyway, after they're done and everything, Bjorn goes to sleep. Louisa gets up to check on Agnes. Oh, I didn't even mention. So while they're getting it on, Agnes had interrupted, and Bjorn looks to the side and sees that there's a window, like, and it's kind of like foggy glass again, but it's to the hallway, and he sees Bjorn looking at them, and like, Bjorn, why are you fine with that? What's this? What? Anyway, once they're done, Louisa goes to check on Agnes, but she's not in her bed, and then I wrote, what in the absolute fuck? Because Agnes is with Patrick and Karen, which that's fucking weird. Don't put my kid in your bed. And Patrick is sleeping butt-ass naked. Like, full grown man naked, sleeping with your daughter in his bed. What? That's, oh, buddy. That's like, you have the right to stab him at that point, and I fucking would've. I would've. Whoa, no, we're having a blow up big fight about this right now. And he's in full nudity, like, his jewels are right there. Like, you can just fucking grab, twist, yank, man. Like, that's what I would be doing. I'd be like, motherfucker, you do not put my kid in your bed when you are butt naked. Who the fuck? Like, it's not even, like, appropriate for your husband to be butt-ass naked with your daughter in the bed. But, like, this random guy, and instead of saying anything or doing anything or freaking the fuck out like I would and beating this man to death, she just grabs Agnes and lets Bjorn know, like, we're leaving right now. And he's like, what? And she's like, no, we're leaving right now. And me, I'd be saying the same thing to my husband, but only because there's a murder scene in the other room because I fucking killed Patrick because he took my daughter into his bed and slept butt-ass naked with her. That's the reason why I would be like, we gotta leave. We gotta get here before the cops arrive, man. And as they're, like, leaving, like, getting in the car and everything, Bjorn is hesitant for some reason. And I'm just like, buddy, no. And again, it's because Patrick has, like, he kind of puffs his ego up, and so, like, and he's very charismatic. So, yeah, I think that's why Bjorn wants to stay, is because he's like, Patrick has some weird, wild energy, and I want it, which I get, but, you can discover that stuff on your own, buddy. You don't need whatever Patrick has. Trust me on that. And then I wrote, fucking Nina's, she left the goddamn bunny. Agnes left her fucking bunny, and she's throwing a hissy about it. It's so funny because the mom's like, Louisa's like, nope, she lives with Abel now, which that would have been me. I'd have been like, no, Ninus, sucks to suck, so sorry. Stop demanding Ninus right now. I don't give a fuck that you miss your stuffed rabbit. We're not going back there. Like, and she literally is like, I miss Ninus. Literally, it's been 5 minutes not even 5 minutes since you noticed he was missing. Like, shut the fuck up. You didn't even know he was gone. Like, don't play those games with me. You're getting another stuffed animal. I don't give a fuck. But Bjorn pulls over and turns around, which, no, that would not be me. Again, I'd be like, nope, bye, Ninus. Bye, buddy. Hope you find your dad. So Bjorn is like, I'll be out. I'm going in. I'll be out in 2 minutes. Literally, the second he walks into the house, Agnes is like, oh, and leans down, and it's the fucking bunny rabbit. She's like, Ninus is here. He must have fell. I would beat my kid right there. I'm so sorry. I would be like, no. Which, This is why I support my decision to have been like, nope, sorry, you lost it. Sucks to suck. And maybe that makes me, like, not as sympathetic. I don't give a fuck. Not as empathetic. I don't give a fuck. This is what's best for the family. So sorry, kid. And I'm right. It turns out I was very right. Anyway, Louisa has to go inside to let Bjorn know that they already have the rabbit, so stop looking. She hears voices upstairs, and she goes to investigate, and Patrick is, like, very upset that they're leaving. And Bjorn is, like, trying to explain nicely. Like, he's just like, oh, we just, we're gonna go, and, yeah, we need to go. And fuck being nice. Just get out of there. And Patrick is like, I want to know why you're going, basically. And, what? you were sleeping butt-ass naked with my daughter in your bed last night. What the fuck? Absolutely not. You're lucky you're alive right now, my guy. But he wants them to, like, spell it out for him. So Bjorn starts making dumbass excuses and talks about how the bed's not comfortable and weird shit like that, and reaches out to Louisa. And she does step up to the plate here, which, good for her. She's talking about the roadhouse, which was weird, the loud music, which was disrespectful and just rude, the drinking and driving, which, wow. Yeah, that's definitely, why would you stay? No thanks. And then they're touching in front of her. She was like, that's crossing the line. It was very inappropriate. And then Patrick is like, I'm in shock. And you're like, what the fuck? I don't give a damn what you are. My family's leaving. Also, like I wrote, it feels like we're having an intervention, because Karen steps in to try and disable their arguments. And she does disable quite a few of them really well. But when it comes to, like, she's like, the inappropriate touching, she's like, we were just having a good time, guys. And, like, okay, but you're still an adult, and you don't need to be groping each other like you're, 16-year-olds and need to get it on in the middle of this restaurant. Like, please don't. Please don't. Please control yourselves. And then, oh my gosh, Louise is like, what about my daughter in your bed with your husband and you, and he's naked? And she's like, I'm so sorry, but, like, where were you? She was calling for you. So why didn't you answer her? And it's like, that doesn't fucking matter, bitch. I could be sitting in my room reading a book, ignoring the fuck out of her. I could be in the ceiling. I could be dead. It doesn't fucking matter. You don't put my daughter in your bed with your naked husband. What? And then Patrick says he's heartbroken. He's so sad because he feels like he's failed them as a host. And he's like, but today is going to be a great day. I promise you. Today is going to be great. If you stay, today is going to be a great day. Spoiler, it is not a great day. The ladies seem to be okay, and the kids, like, they're doing, like, yard work, which, what? How is that part of the great day plan? Very confused there. But Bjorn and Patrick are having, like, uncomfortable silence times in the car until Patrick asks if he can turn on the radio, and Bjorn's like, yeah, you can turn on the radio, like, kind of like, I'm not like my wife. And you're like, okay, buddy. And he's like, you can turn it up if you like. And I was like, this fucking guy. This is the kind of man, don't marry you, Bjorn. So then they have a conversation about music, and Patrick's like, what do you like? And, they kind of like everything. And then he's like, I like to sing, Patrick is. And he's like, this is what angels sound like. So he puts in this tape, and it's like this very dainty music, and it's a song by Tronte Oosterhuis, which I'm sure I definitely botched that name, but that is a real person, and she does do music kind of like this, but there is no song by her called It Never Ends, which is what Patrick said this song is. This is Never Ends by Tronte Oosterhuis. So I feel cheated. I also feel like, what the hell? Did she make this just for this movie? Because that would actually be kind of cool. Also, why can't I find it? Why can't I find it? I wanted to look at the lyrics. Why can't I find it? But I think the name of the song in and of itself is kind of like, that's pretty telling. That's, yep, it never ends. Yep, you're right. The weird social awkwardness never ends. You're so right. So that is apparently on the way to the grocery store because they talked about the vegetarian thing. And so on their way back, I noticed they've got veggies and bread, and I think that's so damn funny. So they went to the store to get veggies and bread for Louisa. But Patrick, like, stops to have, like, a heart-to-heart with Bjorn. And, like, at first he's just like, I'm so sorry, about, bad hosting, blah, blah, blah. But then he's talking about something inside of him, and then Bjorn is now crying, telling Patrick he's just some guy and he doesn't want to be some guy, and he's like, I'm just some guy and this is not who I wanted to be. And I'm like, how the fuck did Patrick break him down so fast? Like, wow. And I was like, this movie's theme is amazing. That's what I said at that point. Like, it's just amazing. So Patrick is like, come on, I want to show you something. And they walk off into, like, this, like, construction-y area, but, like, with no construction equipment. It looks like they just dug out what was supposed to be a retention pond, a pool, something. Maybe they were digging for rocks and collecting rocks. I have no idea. But it's basically a pit, and there's a little bit of water in the bottom of the pit. So that's cool. And then, nope, they go by this pit. Thank God. If that was what he was going to show him, I was like, this is lame. But they go and stand on this hill, and this is, like, my favorite scene. I just love the shot. I love where they're standing. They look so tiny up on this hill. And the way Patrick yells is just so, like, I don't know. Like, I felt it, man. Like I said, freaking Fedya, he gives such a good performance as Patrick. He just makes you feel like you're energized now. Like, I get why Bjorn likes this guy in this moment. Like, and so he screams, and it's so funny because he goes from, like, right to left, screaming at, like, the landscape, the world. And so Bjorn just, like, he doesn't even say anything to Bjorn. He just looks at Bjorn, and Bjorn just, like, starts nodding, and then he tries it himself. It's incredible. Favorite scene in the whole fucking movie. When they get back to the house, they decide to get in their skivs and rush to the pool. And the pool is so fucking tiny. Like, it's the smallest fucking pool. My neighbors have a pool like that, but it's, like, at least 3 times that size. Like, it's so funny to me. This pool's so tiny in this little shed. And what makes it 50 times funnier is that, like, as soon as they got there, Patrick was like, Bjorn, I want to show you my pool. And it's so fucking tiny. Anyway, the kids are like, the kids. Agnes says that they would like to show them a dance that they've been working on. And so she's like, okay, maybe after lunch. And Karen asks Agnes to set the table, like, specifically. And I'm just like, what the fuck? But Louisa is, like, weirded out, but she's like, why don't you show everybody how well you can set the table? Makes it a fun kind of a thing, so it's not fucking weird. And then she cuts her hand, and they're like, oh, good thing we have a doctor in the house, which is the fucking line you see from the 2024 one. And he's like, I'm not a doctor. And unlike in that scene in the trailer where he, like, is like, oh, you should have seen the look on your faces, plays it off as a joke. No. Fucking Patrick is just like, oh, no, I'm not a doctor, I lied. And he's like, sometimes I get insecure when I talk to other men or something like that. And so I lie. And you're just like, that's too much information. I didn't need to know that. But also, thank you for your honesty, I guess. And he says it like it's such a normal thing to be telling them. Like, I know we've only known you for, like, 10 days total, but, like, here's my insecurities. I lied about being a doctor. And you're like, wow, that's really special. Thank you, Patrick, for sharing. And this is the best part, is Bjorn's like, oh, well, what do you do for work then? And he's like, I don't work. I don't believe in working. There are moments where I'm like, fuck Patrick, but then there are moments where I'm like, I love him so much. Like, this is just, like, oh, it's so funny. And as they're, like, dealing with Louise's cut hand, Karen tells Agnes that she set the table wrong. And I wrote, ended. Delete this trip now. And then, like, as they're eating lunch, Karen starts wiping Agnes's face for her, and she's telling her something, And I don't know what it is, but it seems like she's telling Agnes to eat what's on her plate. And Louisa's like, stop telling my daughter what to do. And I wrote, true. And then it's so funny because they're like, okay, okay. And then Patrick leans over and pours her so much fucking wine. And it's so good because it's just like a really subtle social cue. And that's like, this whole movie is built on these subtle social cues, you know what I'm saying? So the fact that he just pours her an assload of wine is like, okay, lady, calm down. Maybe have a drink, relax. And I'm just like, oh, fuck, it's so funny. So then it's dance time. Yay. And Patrick stops the music to say something to Abel. And he says he's doing terrible. And then he stops the music again. And they're like, maybe chillax. And he's like, no, he has no rhythm. And Bjorn's like, they're just kids. But Patrick is like, nah, man, he's not gonna get any better if I don't treat him like this. And so they play the music again, and he stops and he gets physically weird with Abel. Like, it's that whole moving his feet thing. And Agnes feels weird and doesn't want to dance anymore, but Patrick is like, this is a duet. And I'm like, oh no. he's gonna force her to do it with him. And so Bjorn is like, oh, just one more time, Agnes, just one more time. And Louisa is like on Agnes's side, but Bjorn convinces her to do it. And that shouldn't have done it, because literally Patrick throws, like, it's so funny because it's the mermaid mug he was gifted in the beginning, and he fucking throws the mug at Abel and just starts yelling, and I'm like 80% certain he's swearing at the kid, and he's looking down, Abel is, and he's crying, and Agnes is crying, and Patrick plays the song again, even though it's just Abel up there, and Abel's not doing anything, he's just crying, the poor baby. And then Bjorn does the like most manly thing in the whole movie that he has done. He grabs the boombox and he turns off the music and starts shouting at Patrick, and he's like, he's only a child, what's wrong with you? And then like Karen's like, oh, so you're gonna yell at us just because we do things differently. And he's like, no, it's not about doing things differently, it's about doing what's right. And he has a really nice speech, very good. And then I wrote, is Patrick swearing at Abel? I don't know, I think so. Louisa leaves because, clearly this couple is not having it. They don't give a fuck what this other couple has to say. And so Louisa is like, I can't handle this. So she goes outside. Bjorn and Agnes follow her, but Louisa wants Agnes to go inside because she doesn't want Agnes to see her like this. And Agnes takes literally zero fucking social cues, like none. And it's so annoying. Like, she's so clueless, even for a child. Like, I don't know. Maybe you could be like, well, maybe she's on the spectrum or something. Like, okay, whatever. But this is just still really clueless for a child. If she's just a normal ass child, this is very clueless. She seems to be about like 5 or 6, and like I get being like, mommy, what's wrong? But I don't know. I think it's just a little too much. Anyway, that night, Bjorn starts talking about flute lessons Tuesday. And I wrote, nothing is good. Everything sucks. Flute lessons Tuesday are not happening. While he's brushing his teeth, Patrick comes in to piss, and he doesn't say a damn thing. But when he's done pissing, and it's so funny because Bjorn's still brushing his teeth, and it's just like, what the fuck? So when he's done pissing, he turns around and looks at Bjorn through the mirror and winks at him, and then leaves. Just like that is so fucking funny. I mean, it's not, but it is at the same time. Like, that's hilarious to me. So then later we have Abel doing his moaning thing. Agnes is just sleeping in with Louisa and Bjorn at this point. Abel's moaning. You can hear Patrick telling him to like shut the fuck up. Bjorn's the only one awake, so he watches Patrick stomp down the hallway and yells at Abel, and I don't know, maybe hits him, and then he goes back to his own room. And Bjorn just, like, can't sleep. He hears voices, like, really loudly, and I was like, TV? Yes, it's the TV. So Bjorn turns off the TV. And Patrick is in the background as he's, like, walking through the house. And you can see Patrick in the background through the glass door. And he's, like, taking a smoke watching him. The kitchen sink's running. So, Bjorn turns that off. Outside, the shed door is open, and like it's kind of like doing this weird banging thing, and so Bjorn heads out to like close it, I guess, like make it stop, because at this point he's just sick of noise, or maybe he's just being considerate. I don't even know at this point. I just wrote buffoon, because it's the dumbest thing he could do. And then I wrote, this shed is loaded. There's cameras, there's luggage, there's jewelry, there's pictures of past victims. Fuck, my dude. Yikes. Like, literally. And it's so crazy. So he sees Abel with another couple and then starts tracing the children and the photos back to other couples. So it's literally like his photo with his family and Agnes and Abel. But then he looks at a different photo and you see Abel with a different couple, and he looks happy in this photo compared to their photo. And then he sees Karen and Patrick with a different kid. So that kid looks miserable. He finds that kid in a different picture with a different couple, and that kid looks happy. And so, like, it's just this tracing line of, like, kid is with a different couple, then next photo that kid is with Patrick and Karen, and he or she looks miserable. And so it's just this constant, like, rotating. And so he's like, you know, connecting dots, maybe Jimmy Neutron brain blast, finally. And so he leaves the shed kind of spooked, and the pool house light is on and the pool house is open. And he looks in there, and Abel has been drowned in the pool. He's just laying face down in this pool, dead. And I wrote, everything is awful. You're all fucked. And Bjorn goes back inside and is like, we gotta get the fuck out. We gotta go. And they pack up. That's amazing. I wouldn't even be grabbing my luggage, damn it. I'd just be like, we're going. Bye. Bjorn is so shaky. He's got, like, putting the luggage away. He's freaking out. He starts the car, and we see that it's on empty. Big yikes there. So he's crying and driving, and I was like, that's a vibe, my dude. I feel you on that. That's what I would be doing, crying and driving. And a car pulls up behind him so fast, and he's, like, freaking out, but then it passes him. And so he's, like, a little relieved. But if you've been paying attention to the car Patrick and Karen have been driving, you know it's their car. And at some point, he pulls over, and you can see the car moving again in the background. So you're like, oh, okay, well, that's not foreboding at all. He gets back on the highway, and then this car pulls onto the highway behind him and is, like, tailing him. So he pulls over onto this dirt road really quick. And the car is, like, going on this dirt road for a bit, which, why would you drive that far on this dirt road? That is a bad idea. You don't even know where the fuck you're going. And then there's a big bump, and they're stuck. Absolutely lovely. No signal here. All good things. I wrote, everything is alright, starts playing. That's not what happens. That's just, in my head, that's what happens when everything is fucked. I go, everything is alright. So Bjorn walks, like, ahead of the car. I wrote, why are you walk so far ahead of car, Bjorn? He sees a light on at a house in the distance, though, and so he tells his family that he's going for help, but lock the doors. Lock the car doors, stay in the car. Which, why would you not tell them at this point that fucking Patrick and Karen are dangerous? Like, why would you not? But he doesn't. And you see Patrick is on the prowl. So as soon as Bjorn leaves, you're like, this is gonna be bad. I wrote, is this house fake? He touches it and it just falls over. It's like a set. But that's not what happens. He's, like, headed up to the house. He's got to go down this, like, ditch that's full of water, and he gets, like, neck deep in mud water and climbs over a fence and gets to the house to call out for help. And he starts calling out for help, but there is no answer. And we see that Patrick is at the car now. So Bjorn doesn't know any of this. He just knows he's yelling for help. No one's helping him. I'd be busting in that house. I don't give a fuck. But apparently he doesn't think to do that. He runs back to the car, and surprise, surprise, the car is empty. Great. He grabs Nunes, and I wrote, aw, that's so sweet. He goes running down the dirt path, stops for a big cry, and then we see headlights turn on. And these headlights come to a stop in front of him, and it's obviously Patrick's car, and he just, hey, Bjorn. And I don't know why, it just struck me as really funny. So he's basically like, hey, Bjorn. And then he carries on. He's like, oh, you know, thanks for the call. I'm glad we could come help you and get you. And Louisa in the car is like, yeah, thank you very much. You know, thank you for helping, blah, blah, blah. And so Patrick walks over to Bjorn, which is, they're outside the car. And Bjorn is, like, connecting all the dots. And so he's like, Patrick's like, get in the car. And he begs Patrick, please don't hurt my family. And he's like, he pulls the old do as we say and you'll be good shtick, which that's not true usually. Usually when they say that, that's a fucking lie. And I wrote, Louisa thinks they rescued them, lol. Then we get the car ride back, and Agnes is like, is Abel sleeping? Yeah, forever. That's all he does now, actually. Sorry, Agnes. They're like, oh, is Abel alone? And they're like, no, the babysitter is there. Babysitter extraordinaire. The tall, white, like, middle-aged guy. He's there. For some reason, he was up that morning, and they were able to call him, and he was able to look after Abel so they could go. Yeah, okay, whatever. Patrick comes to a stop in the middle of this dirt road, and I wrote, shit, fuck, shit, fuck. This is not my beautiful house. This is not my beautiful wife. Because they literally are stopped in the middle of nowhere. And so, like, I'm like, this is not good. Patrick gets out, though, to take a leak. And so he's taking a leak, and Bjorn is eyeing those keys. They're in the ignition, and he's eyeing them. And you can see his mind's doing a little hamster wheel run. And you're just like, please, hop over. Please, do something. Please. He does not. I was so mad. I was like, this is the worst. This is an emasculated man, guys. And why? Just lacks self-confidence. It's his own self. His own damn self is doing it. Bjorn should have at least tried. That I can't stand that. Cannot stand it. And Agnes is like, I want to go home now. I'm scared. And Patrick tells her to be quiet. And Louise is offended, but Bjorn tells her to do as Patrick says. She doesn't. And then Karen tells Louisa to be quiet. And she's like, we're not going to the house. And Patrick stops, flashes his lights at some other car. It's the babysitter guy. Louisa is lying to Agnes about nothing bad happening while Mom is there. And I can't stand that. Oh, that's so scary. I'm so sorry, kid. Patrick tells them to shut the fuck up, which is nice. And Bjorn's kind of like, how dare? And then Patrick do big swing, punches Bjorn right in the fucking mouth. And then Agnes is very scared. And I just wrote in all caps, we're at the climax. So Patrick pulled a Bundy on them. They're like, Louisa's trying to get out, and she can't. The door handle isn't working for whatever reason. Or it's just not there. I can't remember. But yeah, basically just, pulling a Bundy. And then Karen tells Agnes it's going to be okay. No, it's not. Tells Louisa to let go of Agnes, please. Please don't do that. And she's like, you will let go. So then the babysitter opens the door and, like, puts Louisa in a chokehold. These parents give up the worst fucking fight. Like, I'm going to give Bjorn some credit. He's getting his ass whooped in the front seat because he keeps trying, and Patrick already has the advantage just because he struck first, right? So Patrick is also a huge fucking guy in comparison to Bjorn. Maybe not huge, but he is significantly bigger built. He's taller, he's just got more muscle, it looks like, than Bjorn. But Louisa puts up barely any fight. She's like kind of screaming, kind of struggling, which, oh man. So as Mom is in chokehold, Bjorn gets his ass whooped. He's like, you can see he's kind of like dizzy and stuff because he's just getting punched in the face by Patrick over and over again. Patrick kind of goes into the back seat and opens up Agnes's mouth. Fucking Karen pulls out the scissors from earlier that day that she was using in the garden, and just starts cutting Agnes's tongue off. Holy shit, you see it too. I mean, it's not like long, grotesque, like body horror type stuff. It's just like, this is what happens. And then the babysitter yanks Agnes out of the car, and you just see blood coming down her chin, and she's just like yelling and moaning and like freaking out because, like, obviously. And then as soon as that's done, Patrick starts driving away. And Louise is raging, but like, fucking kill them? Try gouging their eyes out? Hello? The fuck? And Bjorn is in shock. Louisa is crying. And I don't understand these parents. I don't understand them at all. Like, even just thinking about something happening to my nieces or my nephews, I don't even have kids of my own, but, like, just thinking about something happening to my nieces or nephews, I get, like, rabid grizzly bear angry and murderous. And so these parents just crying is insane to me. I'd be strangling the fuck out of somebody. I would be just fighting until I couldn't breathe anymore, until my heart stopped. I would just be fighting and fighting and fighting until someone ended me, because wow. But again, that's just kind of who these people are. They get taken back to the yelling grounds, hooray. And Karen and Patrick escort Bjorn and Louisa out of the car. Bjorn is he's a fucking mess. He's like muddy, blood is everywhere, and the couples are standing facing off with each other. And Bjorn says, "Why are you doing this?" And Patrick says, "Because you let me." And I wrote, "Oh goddamn, fuckity fuck. That's it. That's the line. That's it. That's the through line. That's the message. Why are you doing this? Because you let me. You don't have any boundaries, my guy. You can't enforce shit. You're not a real man because you can't enforce shit. And now you're not even going to be real people either, because we're going to end you, basically." And now that I'm thinking about it, that's kind of like why they're taking their kid's tongue, right? Like, to stand up for yourself, part of that is speaking out. And now their child can no longer do that, and they can no longer do that. And so it's kind of like, it's just this symbolic thing of, like, you don't have any boundaries. Your kid will not have any boundaries. I mean, obviously they're going to kill Agnes at some point, but it's just kind of, like I said, the symbolic thing, the trauma, whatever. So Patrick tells them to take off their clothes, and Louisa complies first because she's donezo. She's like a ghost, basically. She's a zombie. Just starts getting naked. Bjorn follows after, and for 1 second, like, Louisa covers her boobs, but it's all coming off, so you can see she's kind of like, what is the point of covering myself? Like, we're fucking done. We're gonna die, you know? So they take their pants off, they're shivering, because they're butt naked, and it's Holland, and it's wintry time, and that's when we get the full nudity, male and female, and basically, they get down into the weird pit, and they're kind of, like, wandering a little bit, and they hold each other, and they're crying, man, and Bjorn apologizes, which, good for him. This is a big part is your fault. Your wife tried to get you to leave so early, and you were like, nah. But right as soon as he apologizes, there's a big rock that just slams into Louisa's face. And I was like, oh my God, they are stoning these people. And that is just, like, an underrated, horrible way to die. Like, I think, you think, like, drowning, being set on fire, stuff like that. But, like, being stoned to death also would fucking suck. Like, that sounds horrible. And, like, the stoning goes on for a little bit. Not, like, an egregiously long time, but just an appropriate amount of time to show how much pain this would cause them. Which, I mean, I think that's... I prefer when horror movies do that, and not because I like seeing people suffer, but I think it helps to look at that and be like, that's suffering. That's painful. I would never want that to happen to me, kind of a thing, and I would never want to do that to another person, because look at that. That's fucked up. Like, that's horrible. That's kind of why I appreciate when horror movies do it, not egregiously, because that's when it turns into torture porn, but, like, you've got that good amount of, wow, that is suffering. And that's kind of what it is. They're on the ground, naked, and Patrick finally picks up this big-ass rock and just chucks it right at Bjorn's head. And you get this wide shot of it just hitting his head and bouncing off his head, and you're just like, oh, it's so painful. I mean, part of me while I'm watching it, if you're someone who's, like, a behind-the-scenes person, I'm like, those are foam rocks, and they're throwing them, and that would be a really fun scene to film. But... like, in the moment you're watching, and if you're still plugged into the movie and you're not thinking about the behind-the-scenes shit, you're just plugged into the movie, believing the story wholeheartedly, you're like, wow, they're throwing rocks at these people until they die. Okay, that's what we're doing. Holy shit. And they did. Morning comes. They're still naked in there, so I'm like, okay, so they're probably dead. And you see that there's, like large piles of rocks around them, but not, like, they're laying in dirt, and then, like, there's a space of dirt and then rocks, and a space of dirt and then rocks. And so it kind of makes me think that those are other couples, like, that they have stoned, and they just bury rocks on top of them. And I wrote, because we get, like, a really good close-up of Louisa and Bjorn, and they do a good job of making them look dead and stiff. Like, a lot of horror movies, like Late Night with the Devil, she just looks too lively for me in that movie to be dead. These two look fucking dead. Like, it's awful. Like, they really do look dead. So kudos to whoever did those effects, because that's incredible shit right there. And then we get the ominous music, and full time, it's summertime, kids be running in sprinklers and shit, and ta-da, we see a family of 3. There's a little boy, which probably be their next target, because it seems like they switch between boy and girl every time, and a dad and a mom, and I wrote, beware. We don't believe in work in this house, just murder and vacay. Ay, that's what I wrote. And then you see Patrick and Karen pulling up to that house. And you can see Agnes in the back. Like, Patrick looks in the rear view and there's Agnes in the back. And she has newness, which is, I would not have expected them to let her have that. But, you know, that's kind of nice. But also not really when you think about everything. And then that's the end. It ends there. So you just know they're going to keep doing it. And, wow, painful. Moral of the story, enforce those boundaries. Set those boundaries. Enforce those boundaries. Inform others of those boundaries. You guard those boundaries like your life depends on it, because sometimes they do. And that's the truth, y'all. Your boundaries, your life can depend on those. There are specifically people, predatory people. I mean, they call them predators. What do predators do? They search for prey. They are on the hunt. They are on the prowl. And that is exactly Patrick and Karen. That's why they're pulling up to this vacation every year, this vacation house, because they are specifically looking for prey. And so when you are not someone who is vocal about your boundaries, and you don't have to be so vocal, right? You just have to be clear and then be concise and then be confident and firm on those, and stuff like this doesn't happen to you. And I think a lot of times, like, okay, this is a situation, right, that's been kind of blown out of proportion, I would say. Like, this is really, like, how often does this happen? You know, specifically, you go on vacation and you meet this couple who seem really cool, and you are not strong in your boundaries, and then you end up at their house, and then they end up cutting your child's tongue off and killing you and your spouse. Like, obviously, that's probably, I mean, maybe it's happened, but, like, that's probably few and far between, right? But the more realistic side of that is, you know, you've got family members who are predatory, or you have, you know, a lover or a significant other that is predatory, or you have a sibling that is, you know, or just anyone, a boss, anything. And people will poke out your boundaries. That's constantly, people who are looking to use and abuse you are going to constantly poke at your boundaries. And if you are not firm on those, they're going to take you for what you're worth. That's literally, why are you doing this? Because you let me. And that's literally, that's it. That's the moral of the story. Anyone who is a predator, anyone who's looking to use and abuse anyone, that's it. Why are you doing that to them? Because they let me. That's literally it. It's a power trip for them. They get everything out of it. You get nothing out of it. And that's why Patrick is so, like, he's just, like, he seems very, I don't know how to put it, like, violently spastic, I guess you could say, in some scenes. Like, he's just so, like, violently alive, and you can tell it's not like, oh, I'm so happy to be alive. He's like, it's like watching, you know, a lion start snarling at its prey or something. Like, it's not right. And I love that, because, like, the actor is just so good at bringing that character to life. But there are people like that. There are people who are just looking out for themselves, who are looking to use and abuse others because they want something they want their power trip, they want to be lazy, whatever. And so that's what they do. They're and a lot of times, obviously, you're not gonna get murdered at the end of it, right? But you might be bankrupt, you might end up with kids, and you might be alone, and you might, you know, like, there's a lot of people out there who are looking for convenience. And so maybe they're not necessarily predatory, but they are looking for convenience. So if you do not set up those boundaries and enforce them, they'll take advantage of you. And there are tons of predators out there who look for that. And I'm not talking about predators like sexual predators necessarily. There's just predators of all kinds. There's people who don't want to do their job, so they'll shovel it onto you. There's people who don't want to have to work. I mean, Patrick says, I don't believe in working. You know, he just sells all the shit that he gets from these people who he tricks into coming to their house, and like, yeah, he doesn't have to work because he's just killing these people. And so I just love everything about this movie's message, and I just think it's so smart and so clever. And so I'm really excited, actually, now that I've seen this one, which it's crazy because I was like not excited to watch this movie. I was like, this is gonna kill me. I'm gonna be but I don't have a ton of social anxiety anymore. I'd be on those meds, you know. But I was just, I don't know, I guess I literally thought like some kind of torture porn stuff was gonna happen. It didn't. You know, as I've explained, emotionally, probably, but physically, no. And so I think it's an underrated form of torture, though, is emotional torture, and that's kind of what this is. It's psychological and it's emotional, and they're gaslighting these people, and these people are gaslighting each other. That's the other thing, is part of your boundaries, should be part of your boundaries, is you stick with your spouse. Like, sorry, not sorry. You stand up for your spouse. Like, that's what, you married them for a reason, and if you don't know what that reason is, find that reason, or get out. And don't be in a situation like this. And if you are, guess what? You're still married at that time. So sucks to suck, you need to bone up and do what you need to do. Anyway, enough ranting on that. This movie's good. Can't wait for next month, when we get to see the American remake. I've heard good things about it. I'm always, of course, very iffy on American remakes of movies. And I definitely think McAvoy is, like, from what I've seen in the trailers, he's maybe a little bit more chaotic and a little bit more openly predatory than Patrick is. So I don't know how they're going to balance that in the movie, because, like, Patrick is the perfect balance in this one of, yes, he's a predator. Yes, he's abusing things. Yes, he's taking things way too far. But then he also is like, oh, man, I'm so sorry. And he's just, like, so believable to a certain extent, and then also just so charismatic. Like, you want to believe the guy is sorry. If you're Bjorn. Me personally, I'm like, get the fuck out of here. The second this guy starts like doing weird shit, I'm like, get the fuck out of here. I don't have any tolerance for that. Hit the road, Jack. But I'm a lot different than a lot of people. So I'm just curious to see how that character plays out in the new one that's coming out next month. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I wasn't very excited for it, but I kind of am, because I've heard good things. And then also, James McAvoy's a great actor. And yeah, just very excited for that. So watch this one before you watch the next one, for sure. So if you're someone who's looking forward to that movie, make sure you check this one out, because it's amazing. And also, I'm sorry, I should have said up top, if I sound stuffy, it's because I'm kind of sick. Maybe it's allergies. I don't know. I do have a stuffy nose, so I apologize on that. But thank you guys for listening. Hopefully you enjoyed the review. Hopefully it gives you a better idea of whether this movie is or isn't for you. And I hope to see you in the next review. Until then, be well and do well, everyone. And don't forget to enforce those boundaries. Your life could very well depend on it.